Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Good morning and welcome. My name is Jamie Bosket. I have the distinct privilege of serving as the President and CEO of the Virginia Historical Society. And on behalf of our Board of Trustees, our staff, and our volunteers, and everyone who's helped make today possible, I am honored to be the first to welcome you to the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. I am so thankful to see such a remarkable turnout today as we dedicate Arthur Ashe Boulevard. We open our newest exhibition, Determined, the 400-year struggle for Black equality, and together we mark the 400th anniversary of the arrival of captive Africans in English North America. Today's gathering is one of remembrance and reflection. It is also one of celebration. We are gathered on the front lawn of a very historic institution. In fact, this is the oldest cultural organization in the Commonwealth of Virginia, founded in 1831. And for nearly 200 years, we have been collecting materials for the purpose of telling the story of this place. Some 14 million historical artifacts are housed within the walls behind me. We have much to be proud of, but we still have so very much we must do to be the state history museum we all deserve, that one that represents all and welcomes all. Dr. Carter Woodson, a Virginian, and the man considered the founder of Black history, so aptly wrote, "Those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from the teaching of history." How very true. We must do more, be more, and we will. And we are committed here at the museum to a bright future dedicated to inclusion and access. The exhibit that we open today is a legacy project of the Commonwealth of Virginia's 2019 commemoration, American Evolution, which remembers key historical events that occurred in Virginia in 1619 and continue to influence America today, including, of course, the arrival of enslaved Africans at Point Comfort, Virginia. I hope that you will go and learn more about all the statewide activities this year at AmericanEvolution2019.com. With the support of Altria, Bank of America, as well as generous supporters Conrad and Peggy Hall, Gil and Charlotte Miner, we've done something truly special that we're proud of, and I hope you all will take time to see it and to learn. Learn the stories of 30 Virginians over 4 centuries, stories of people like Arthur Ashe, important stories of perseverance and also progress, stories that remind us of the work still to be done. History is so very valuable for this reason. It gives us perspective and empathy to make us better people and together a better community. This is why commemorations like today are so important. This is why dedications like this are so very important. We are fortunate today to have with us a rather distinguished assembly. I'd like to make a few acknowledgments as we begin. First, to the members of Richmond City Council. Thank you very much for your support and for making this happen. Thank you to our Mayor, Levar Stoney. Mr. Mayor, your team in this city has been a remarkable partner in making today's program possible. Thank you, sir. And I will take that one step further because I would like to commend the many dedicated city employees who contributed their talent and effort to make today possible, dozens of them all under the leadership of Chief Administrative Officer Selena Cuffey-Glenn. Thank you to all of them. I'd like to acknowledge the representatives of the Commonwealth, including numerous members of our General Assembly, Lieutenant Governor Fairfax, and Governor Northam. If you all would please wave and be recognized. I'd like to acknowledge the national representatives with us, including members of the Congressional Black Caucus, including Congresswoman Bass, Congresswoman Pressley, Congressman John Lewis, who will be with us in just a moment, as well as our Virginia representatives, Congressman Bobby Scott and Congressman Don McEachin. Also with us this morning, our Senator and fellow Richmonder, Tim Kaine. Now I'd like all members of the Arthur Ashe extended family to please give a big wave so we can all clap for you. It is now my pleasure to invite forward Mr. Tom Farrell, Chairman, President, and CEO of Dominion Energy, to extend his welcome, which he does with our deep appreciation for Dominion's presenting sponsorship of today's ceremony. Tom?
Morning, everyone. Today marks a bold step forward for our city. Many folks here remember the hard work to build the Arthur Ashe statue on Monument Avenue, now almost 25 years ago. Like many things important in Richmond, it was very controversial. Lots of people had reasons not to build it, or to build it somewhere else, or to do something else altogether. It was not easy. But Richmond is a better place today because political and civic leaders with vision took action. Leaders like Senator Tim Kaine, who then served on the City Council representing the 2nd District. He helped make that celebration possible. Councilwoman Kim Gray represents the 2nd today. She helped make today's celebration possible. And we should all thank her for her leadership. These efforts demonstrate what can happen when good people who love our city come together and persevere despite all the hurdles and all the naysayers. 2 of my friends did that a generation ago. First was a political leader, Senator Benny Lambert. He served on the board of directors of Dominion Energy and was my boss. He dedicated his life to serving this city and his state. He led the campaign to raise the money to build the statue. His partner in that effort was a business leader, Tom Tuning, who was the chief financial officer of Dominion Energy at the time. Tom had played tennis with Arthur Ashe in the 1960s when they were teenagers. And because the law kept Richmonders divided, they had to sneak around to do it. Arthur Ashe was not allowed to play at the Bird Park tennis courts just a few blocks down this road. So Arthur Ashe's father would pick Tom up and take him to courts on the north side of town. And then he would stand guard around the tennis courts to make sure nobody harassed them. Those tennis courts are long gone. They were in a park at the corner of Brook Road and School Street. Eventually, the post office got built on that site. You know, there's actually a lot of Richmond history in that story, I think. So when it came time to honor Arthur Ashe, a political leader and a civic leader got together and achieved a wonderful thing for our city. And today we honor Arthur Ashe in this new way, and not because of tennis or Wimbledon or the fact that he lived here. We honor him because he believed in serving people. His community was the world. He taught us to call out injustice everywhere, from apartheid in South Africa to poverty in Haiti. He valued education. His parents taught him that learning shapes human dignity. He believed in inclusion, despite the fact that he'd grown up in a city that did not. He believed everyone deserved a job and the chance to work so they could contribute to society. He believed everyone deserves an affordable place to live. He believed in shaping a future that's different from our past. All of us here today believe those things too. He also believed in learning from the example set by great people who had come before him, like Congressman John Lewis. Now, there are a lot of distinguished political leaders up here. And he's almost here. Governor's done a lot to make 95 work better. Looks like it could use a little more help, Governor. But I think we should all be very proud to have such a distinguished leader like Congressman Lewis come to Richmond to do this event. I believe it's important to name the values that Arthur Ashe lived by, because today is not only about honoring such a great man, it's also about ourselves and the values that we want to shape the future of our hometown. We believe in a Richmond that welcomes everyone, one that learns from our past and builds a future that is better for everyone. We believe in holding ourselves accountable to each other. And we believe in looking forward because we have a lot of work to do to shape the future that we all believe in. So today we dedicate ourselves to the words that Arthur Ashe chose for his statue. They come from St. Paul's letter to the Hebrews. And now, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for Dominion's wonderful and lasting support of this historic institution and for your presenting sponsorship today. We appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're able, please now rise for the presentation of colors by Fort Lee's Army Color Guard and the singing of the national anthem by representatives of 6 Mount Zion Baptist Church of Richmond.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, all the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming. In the rockies reclare the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, see, does the star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
Ladies and gentlemen, if you are able, please remain standing. It is now my pleasure to invite forward Reverend Grady Powell for our invocation. In addition to being the longtime pastor of historic Gilfield Baptist Church of Petersburg, Virginia, Reverend Powell is a dear friend of this museum. Having served on our board for many years, his leadership helped shape our vision for the future. His life experience continues to inspire us today. Reverend Grady Powell.
Would you bow your heads? Let us pray. O divine Spirit, whose presence has been with us from one generation to another, we thank you for your kind investments in all of us. Most especially, we are grateful for the gift of time that has steered us to do and to be good. For the acts of yesteryears, which is a part of our history, that have lifted humankind for the making of a better world, we say thank you. Please forgive us for those times we have used our gifts to divide, to subjugate, and to destroy. The collection and preservation of these gifts, which span over 400 years, by this organization, the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, these acts give us a clear picture of whom we have been. We pray that in reading and observing this history, we will devote ourselves to building that world that is most pleasing to thee. Amen.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Ralph Northam.
Please be seated. Good morning. And thank you to the Virginia Museum of History and Culture for hosting this gathering today, and thanks to all of you for being here on this important occasion. To our congressional delegation representing other states, welcome to Virginia. This year, we mark the 400th anniversary of Virginia's long history of representative democracy and the arrival of enslaved Africans. We must remember that our history is complex. The story of Virginia is rooted in the simultaneous pursuit of both liberty and enslavement. A full accounting demands that we confront and discuss those aspects of our history. And it demands that we look not just to a point in time 400 years in the past, but at how our Commonwealth and our country evolved over the course of those 4 centuries. How did we live up to our ideals or fail to do so? We are examining these issues in various ways this year through exhibits, forums, and other American evolution events. And we are also looking at this history through exhibits like Determined, the 400-year struggle for Black equality here at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. African American history, Black history, is American history. And the way that we teach that history is inadequate and inaccurate, which makes exhibits like this all the more important as we continue the work to rewrite the narrative. My hope and intention is that Virginia will take long overdue action on addressing the racial inequities that exist today. I am grateful for the Virginia Museum of History and Culture for taking up this important conversation. We need to continue to have this kind of dialogue because when we know more, we can do more. Today, we also honor a man who challenged the limitations society placed on men of his skin color, and by doing so advanced the struggle for equality. By breaking down racial barriers in tennis, Arthur Ashe achieved much more than sports fame. That legacy is why we are here to honor him today. Arthur Ashe was a groundbreaker, and I'm proud to be here today as we honor his legacy. Thank you, and may God bless all of you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 6th Mount Zion Baptist Church Choir from Richmond, Virginia.
Our common place, all kinds of diseases. People are slipping away. Economy's down, folks can't get enough pay. But as for me, all I can say is thank you, Lord, for all you've done for me. Folks without homes are living out in the streets, and drug habits, some say they just can't be. Muggers and robbers, no place seems to be safe, but you've been my protection every step of the way. Thank you, Lord, for all you've done for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, United States Senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine.
How about another great hand for 6 Mount Zion? A beautiful congregation formed by freed slaves right after the Civil War, and the Reverend John Jasper, a great historical figure in his own right. So good to have you here with us, and so good to be together with all of you Richmond friends. I want to thank the museum and all of the elected officials here today, especially the members of the Congressional Black Caucus who are visiting Virginia to participate in the forum later this afternoon. Let's give them a big welcome. Thank you, Congresswoman Bass. I'm thrilled to be here with my federal colleagues, Donald McEachin and Bobby Scott, together. Together, we were the sponsors of the congressional bill signed by President Trump that commemorates 2019 and forms a commission to celebrate 400 years of African American history in this country. There was a federal commission in 2007 to commemorate 400 years of the English roots of this nation. There was a federal commission in 2015 to commemorate 450 years of the Hispanic roots of this nation. If English roots matter, if Hispanic roots matter, then African roots matter. And I applaud my colleagues for their work in that way. My role today in the program is old-timer. I know I don't look that old, do I, Karen? I don't look that old, but my role today is old-timer because 24 years ago, when I was much younger, much thinner, had a lot more hair and it was much darker, I was a newly elected member of the Richmond City Council as we engaged with our community in a very, very memorable debate about whether Arthur Ashe's statue should be placed on Roseneath Monument Avenue just a few miles from here. Some of you were around. I particularly hope that Viola Baskerville might be here today because she was a member of our city council who played such a role in that debate. Give Viola and all the 1994 council a round of applause. It was controversial. There were protests. There were discussions. There were different points of view. Tom Farrell said it well about whether Arthur Ashe should be recognized at all. If he should he be recognized on Monument Avenue? Some said Monument Avenue should just be reserved for Civil War generals. Others said Monument Avenue was not good enough for Arthur Ashe. We talked about all of that at the time. The debate finished in a 7-hour council meeting that lasted till about 1:30 in the morning, where hundreds of people came and spoke. The Pulitzer Prize winning Washington Post journalist Tony Horwitz, who just died within the last 2 months, came to cover that event. Here's what he wrote at the time. I came expecting an angry meeting, but what I witnessed instead was a thoughtful discussion on public art, the potency of historic symbols, racial healing, and affirmative action. That's what Richmond did at the time, and the decision to place the Ashe statue on Monument Avenue was a healing in a city and Commonwealth and country that still needs healing to this day. I want to congratulate Mayor Stoney. I want to congratulate the City Council, especially Kim Gray, for this act of healing, the naming of the boulevard, a principal gateway into our city to honor the great Arthur Ashe. Some people ask the question about whether names or naming or renamings are important. Names are very important. The power to name is very important. Let me prove it to you. In the book of Genesis, the story of the formation of the world and of man and woman in the Garden of Eden, what is the first power that God gives to man? The power to name. This is a story that is sacred to Jews and Christians and Muslims. It's in the Quran. The story is well known. God gives a command, be fruitful and multiply. God gives a warning, don't eat from that tree or something bad will happen. And God gives a power. The first power given to man was the power to name all of the animals in the world. Now, God could have named all the animals. God was God. But God decided that it was very important for man to be able to choose the names of those around him, choose the names that would be given to his reality. He brought them to man to see what he would call them, and the man chose a name for each one. Naming is important. This is not a minor thing that we're doing today. We have to acknowledge that so many of the names on a map of Richmond, on a map of Virginia, on a map of this country, so many of the names were not chosen by a full community, invested with the power to choose their name of their reality or tell the story about who they were. No, so many of the names that we live with were chosen by a tiny, tiny subset of people who do not represent the full community of our city or state or nation today. This is an act to rectify that. Arthur Ashe Boulevard is a name chosen by and ably representing Richmond's full community. And that makes this a very great day for our city, and hopefully a day that will be followed by many more such days. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you today.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Harris, nephew of Arthur Ashe.
Good morning. It seems I'm using modern technology today. Everybody else has a book, so bear with me. But Senator Tim Kaine, thank you for your kind words. Thank you for supporting this effort and this Commonwealth and this state. Additionally, Richmond, this is truly a spectacular and momentous day. One we should never forget. Our efforts together are epic. Today, we are letting the world know racism, discrimination, exclusionary tactics, lack of investment in our children, education, and people is bankrupt. We can no longer support these ideals. And if you find yourself a gatekeeper to discrimination and exclusionary tactics, give up your keys today. To Mr. Jamie Bosket, we met over a year ago. And at the moment we walked in the door, you said yes. And I realized that was the easiest sales pitch I ever had. I want to thank you for allowing us to join you. You've been a gracious host, and you've contributed significantly. I will tell you this, there are many who've avoided this building right here behind me because of what's inside. Today, I want you to consider this building is now fully integrated by the City of Richmond. And as we've discussed, we're going to partner with you in bringing more and different faces, peoples, ideals, and thoughts into this building and be a beacon to the world. I do need to give a thanks and gratitude to Councilwoman Kim Gray. You know, it's pretty hard to sometimes get with a council person and have a good open dialogue and conversation. She also said yes right away. We knew it was risky, but we knew it had to be done. We chose to do the right thing at the right time. You are courageous and you are a gracious leader. And to council, thank you for joining her. The fight and struggle is real, but today is a celebration. Please pat yourselves on the back, because you truly have led us. And last but not least, I must thank the Mayor Levar Stoney. From the beginning, he said yes also, which is amazing, because we've heard no a lot of times in this world. He's truly a man of the people, the children of this city, and that is truly phenomenal. You've made it possible for the world to see what real leadership looks like. Continue to lead with your heart and ideals of the man we've named this street after. I owe you a debt of gratitude. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Richmond. How we doing out there? Isn't this a beautiful day in the city of Richmond? Today, we celebrate a true champion. A champion not only on the tennis court, but on the world stage for civil rights and for racial equality. David, thank you for the introduction and for all that you've done to make this day a reality. Let's give him a round of applause, everyone. Not only to preserve and share an important part of your family's legacy, but also to literally mark on an important time and a physical place in our city that will, from this day forward, be known as Arthur Ashe Boulevard. That's right, Arthur Ashe Boulevard. Say it with me one more time, Arthur Ashe Boulevard. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the work and action of our Richmond City Council. In particular, the efforts of our 2nd District Councilwoman, Kim Gray. Ms. Gray carried the legislation that council passed without opposition, making this well-deserved and long overdue name change possible. Thank you, Councilwoman Gray and the City Council. And I want to give a shout out to all the relatives of Arthur Ashe who are here today. Would you please wave your hands and be recognized again? Ladies and gentlemen, this is what progress looks like. For too long, words like progress, change, and ambition have been considered bad words in the city of Richmond. In Richmond, folks did not know that those were Arthur Ashe's key words. As many of you know, Richmond was a different place when Arthur Ashe was growing up here, a place that was not welcoming to people of color. A common refrain I'm sure those like Arthur heard was, "How do you dare want change and be black? How dare you want progress and be black? How dare you be ambitious and be black?" Growing up, Arthur Ashe was denied access to the well-maintained all-white tennis courts of Byrd Park just south of here. Instead, he played tennis at Brookfield Park, a segregated playground near his home. And despite the adversity he faced right here in his hometown, by sheer talent, courage, perseverance, Arthur Ashe brought change to the game of tennis. He brought change to this country, and he brought change to this world. So it is only fitting on June 22nd, 2019, his name and his legacy brings both symbolic and real change to the city of Richmond. With this renaming today and the renaming of Jeb Stuart Elementary School to Barack Obama Elementary School, and erecting a new statue to the great Maggie Lena Walker in Jackson Ward, our city is transforming. It is changing its future, and it's triumphing over its past. As many of you all may know, Arthur Ashe already has a statue in our city on Monument Avenue, and he is the only true champion on that block. But I believe naming the boulevard after him is just as powerful and even more meaningful. Ladies and gentlemen, this stretch of State Route 161 will never be the same after today. Today, Route 161 is getting an upgrade. By naming this boulevard here today after Arthur Ashe, we are once again parting with our darker past and embracing our brighter future. We are making a pledge, etched not simply in paint and steel street signs, but in our hearts. We are reaffirming our commitment to fairness by creating opportunity for everyone. We are reaffirming our commitment to equality by protecting everyone. We are reaffirming our commitment to being inclusive, regardless of who you are, the color of your skin, where you come from, how you worship, or who you love. And in the score-keeping parlance of tennis, the game that Arthur Ashe loved and excelled at so well, we are reaffirming our commitment to love. To love our neighbor, to lift them up and not write them off, to connect and unify, not divide and conquer, to put aside differences and focus instead on seeking common ground and common understanding. I thank Arthur said it best. We must reach out our hand in friendship and dignity, both to those who would befriend us and those who would be our enemy. Simply put, Arthur Ashe Boulevard symbolizes the city we want to be and are becoming each and every day as we build one Richmond. And what better time and place to continue this work than in Richmond as we commemorate the 400 years since the first enslaved Africans arrived on the shores of this state. So well represented by the extraordinary work of our friends at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture in this exhibit, Determined. Today we stand on the shoulders of the generations and legacies of the great men and women who came before us. Men like Congressman John Lewis, who honors us with his presence today. He'll get here. 95 is tough. Y'all know it. Oh, he's here, okay. Still 95 is tough. And now at the intersection of our city's past and present, it is our duty to take the next steps in our journey down the right path to lead the way for future generations. We already have a map, a road to follow that will take us in the right direction. Let's follow it together. It's called Arthur Ashe Boulevard. Thank you, Richmond, and God bless you. It is now my honor and distinct pleasure to welcome my friend and my congressman, the congressman for the 4th Congressional District, Mr. Donald McEachin.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Good morning, Richmond. And welcome to Virginia's finest congressional district, the 4th Congressional District of Virginia. Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you, and I want to thank all the dignitaries and people who are with us on this solemn but important occasion. Today is an emotional day for me, and I hope to be able to get through this little chat with you without shedding too many tears. But when you walk into that exhibit, and the first thing you see is these faceless figures that say 20 and some odd Negroes, it just grabs you. It just grabs you. And to think 400 years later, 56 of their children had the honor and privilege of serving in the United States Congress. God is good all the time. As I stand here today, almost in sight of the Confederate Chapel, I'm reminded how far we have come, and yes, how far we have to go. I'm reminded that each of us here stands on the shoulders of those who have come before, on the shoulders of many who have made great sacrifice to make a difference and improve our lives. Whether it was an enslaved individual risking harsh and severe punishment to seek freedom, or even to learn to read, or gather to worship, or those who, after the Civil War, risked death and lynchings for incremental improvements. Those who tried to overcome Jim Crow, or struggled to pay an outrageous poll tax, or pass a literacy test to try and vote, a right supposedly given to them by the Constitution. Those who knew in their hearts and saw in their eyes that separate but equal was a fiction, and one more depravity to keep people down and to treat them as less than human. Those who sat at lunch counters, who refused to go to the back of the bus, and those children, yes, children, who risked mocking and isolation and even violence to integrate schools, and those children who took risk, recognizing that their second-class schools would never prepare them to succeed or lead like our own Virginian Barbara Johns. and those who use their own stature, their hard-earned education to fight for all of us, to use the judicial system to break down the racist systems in place, like our own Oliver Hill. And those who said yes, when everyone else said no. Those who knew that with work and courage and effort, barriers can be broken, such as L. Douglas Wilder, the first African-American governor in the United States, here in Virginia, in the Confederate capital. And as we all know, many barriers still exist. Systematic racism still permeates our country, 400 years after the forced migration of Africans to British North America. But we have these examples, these incredible examples. We have these shoulders to stand on, and in our own time, in our place, we still have heroes standing up and willing to risk insult, offense, and injury to help all of us rise up. And that's what gives me hope and inspiration. I see a people brought here under the worst conditions imaginable, treated as less than human and seen as nothing but property and second-class citizens. I see people who overcome, who believe, who will insist and fight until we really have the equality and justice and fairness that the ideals, if not the reality, of this country. Joining us today are several folks who are heroes, who stood up, who every day in Congress fight to dismantle the racist and bigoted systems of laws that still hold people back. I've learned so much from each of these folks in the Congressional Black Caucus. Our chair, Karen Bass from California. She inspires me each day. Her knowledge, her fearlessness, her eyes on the prize makes me proud to be a soldier in her army. Karen made history in her home state of California when the California Assembly elected her as Speaker, making her the first African woman in history to serve in this role. In the CBC, Karen is our North Star, providing invaluable leadership and guidance. And someone who I know needs no introduction to anyone here, my mentor, my North Star, my big brother, Congressman Bobby Scott. Bobby is the Dean of the Virginia Congressional Delegation, and you better know that when he speaks, everyone listens. And I don't just mean other representatives, I don't just mean African Americans, I don't just mean Democrats. All Virginians know that he speaks with wisdom, compassion, and straight from the heart. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, who will be here later on today, who is here now, who has kept her promise to me to come from that Commonwealth up north in Massachusetts to the real Commonwealth here in Virginia. She may be the newest member of the CBC, but as a freshman, she brings experience and knowledge and inspiration. She has broken barriers her entire life, most recently as the first woman of color elected from Massachusetts, and previously the first woman of color elected to the Boston City Council in its 100-year history. Her life demonstrates her belief to lift the voices of those she represents. But today we are incredibly fortunate to have a singular hero with us, a man whose name is synonymous with courage and conviction, someone on whose shoulders we all stand, and who is an inspiration not only to me, but to so many every single day in the United States Congress. I have to admit, as a delegate and as a state senator, this man was an inspiration, but never someone I thought I would actually meet. And seeing him in the halls of Congress and talking with him, listening to his words of wisdom, have been a life-changing experience for me. For those of you, and I can't imagine there are many of you who don't know the story of the incredible John Lewis, let me review some highlights. Born the son of sharecroppers in Alabama and forced to go to segregated public schools, John Lewis was inspired at an early age to join the civil rights movement to make a difference for his people and his community. Even as a college student at Fisk University, he organized lunch counter sit-ins and participated in freedom rides all across the South, challenging segregation at Interstate Southern bus terminals and elsewhere. Those actions came with great risk, and he was severely beaten by angry mobs and frankly beaten to within an inch of his life. In 1964, Congressman Lewis coordinated voter registration efforts during the Mississippi Freedom Summer. And in 1965, in moments seared in all of our memories, and fortunately now, finally, belated appearing in history books, he and Hosea Williams organized and led over 600 peaceable protesters over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. These peaceable and nonviolent protesters, they were met by Alabama state troopers in a violent confrontation that became known as Bloody Sunday. News coverage of this assault on innocent people helped move Congress to pass the long overdue Civil Voting Rights Act of 1965. Over the next 20 years, John Lewis continued his dedicated leadership to uplift his community, both in terms of bringing rights and bringing them out of poverty. He held diverse positions such as director of the Voter Education Project. In 1977, he was appointed by President Carter as the head of Action, a federal volunteer agency overseeing 250,000 volunteers. In 1981, he was elected to the Atlanta City Council. In 1986, elected to Congress from Georgia's 5th District. He's held and continues to hold numerous leadership positions in the Congress. Congressman Lewis's seminal contribution to civil rights in this country has been recognized by numerous accolades. He has received and richly deserves, including over 50 honorary degrees from prestigious universities and numerous awards, including the Medal of Freedom, our highest civilian award given to him by President Barack Obama. In addition, he is the recipient of the only Lifetime Achievement Profile and Courage Award given by the JFK Library Foundation. In addition, he's the co-author of the best-selling #1 book series on the New York Times list graphic novel called March. This important work is used in classrooms around the country to teach the civil rights movement and to lead and to inspire our next generation of leaders. I could go on, but you're not really here to hear me. And if I did, I would still barely skim Congressman Lewis's biography, but I'll stop now because he has inspired all the work that we do. We'll be even more inspired by his words and his joining us today. So let me introduce to you our inspiration, a truly great American. Richmond, give a warm welcome to Congressman John Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brother McEachin. Thank you for those kind words of introduction. I love you too. I love each and every one of you. It's a beautiful day here. I must tell you that it's good to be in Virginia. It's good to be here in Richmond. Senator King, Governor, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, it's just good to be here. 400 years later, it's good to be here. To see all of the honorable elected officials. You look good. You look smart. To be here with my colleagues for the Congress.
the chair of the CBC, your own congressperson, who I mentioned earlier, Congressperson McEachin, Bobby Scott, to be here with your wonderful mayor, to be here with my sister from the Northeast, Congresswoman Pressley. You know, so much is going through my mind. I have a prepared text, but I'm not going to use it. I'm almost overcome with something. 400 years later, 400 years later, this young brother, young man here, I know your father, can become the lieutenant governor. A young man by the name of Bobby Scott can become the congressperson. And this young brother here is following in a great line of leaders in becoming the mayor. Governor, thank you for being you. Senator, thank you for being you. And thank all of the honorable elected officials for getting out there and getting in what I call the way, for getting in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. Now, I didn't grow up in a big city like Richmond. I didn't grow up in a big city like Washington, D.C., or Los Angeles, or Boston. I grew up in rural Alabama on a farm. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But back in 1944, when I was 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4, my father had saved $300, and a man sold him 110 acres of land. My family still owns this land today. So during many, many days and many years, long before I was even a dream, when we came over the ocean 400 years ago to this land, we learned to pick cotton. We learned to work in the tobacco fields. We learned to plow mules. Sometimes we were beaten and left for dead. But we never gave up. We never gave in. We never lost hope. We kept the faith, and we kept our eyes on the prize. So somebody, somewhere, should say thank you. And I know there's some people in America today are saying nothing has changed. But let me tell you, we live in a different America. When I was growing up and working in the heart of the civil rights movement, people had to count the number of bubbles in a bar of soap, the number of jelly beans in a jar. People stood in unmovable lines. We no longer have to count the number of jelly beans in a jar. No longer have to count the number of bubbles on a bar of soap. Because somebody, somewhere, and sometime gave a little blood. And during this season that are coming up, none of us, and it doesn't matter whether we're black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American, straight or gay, we must turn out and vote like we never, ever voted before. Our little democracy is in trouble, deep trouble. We must save our democracy and save our country. We can do it. We must do it. When I was growing up and had to go to the field and work, and sometimes I would fall behind, and my mother would say, boy, you need to catch up. I said, this is hard work. And she would say, hard work never kill anybody. I said, well, it's about to kill me. During the height of the civil rights movement, we worked from sunup to sundown the same way we worked in the field. Growing up there in rural Alabama, outside of a little town called Troy, 50 miles from Montgomery, I saw those signs that said white men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. And I would ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents, why? And they would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in trouble. Don't get in the way. But the action of Rosa Parks, the words of Martin Luther King Jr., and the young people in Little Rock, and even here in this city, there was a young man from Selma, Alabama. Some of the lawyers remember this case, Boynton versus Greyhound. Was arrested. He was a student at Howard University for taking a seat in a so-called white waiting room. Became the Boynton case. Because of what happened here, we decided to organize something called the Freedom Rides. I was 21 years old, had all of my hair, and a few pounds lighter. Back in 1961, black people and white people couldn't be seated on a Greyhound bus together, leaving the nation's capital. So in May of 1961, 13 of us, black and white, met in Washington, D.C. under the leadership of Coy and a man by the name of James Farmer, organized the Freedom Rides of 1961. Along the way, we were beaten, and I will never forget, in a little town called Rock Hill, South Carolina, when we attempted to get off the bus, my seatmate was a young white gentleman from Connecticut. We started to enter a so-called white waiting room, and we were beaten, left bloody by members of the Klan. Many years later, the young man who had beaten us came to my office in Washington, D.C. And he said, Mr. Lewis, I've been a member of the Klan. I'm one of the people who beat you. Will you forgive me? He was in his 70s. He brought his son in his 40s. His son started crying. He started crying. They hugged me. I hugged them back. And I cried. It is the power of the way of peace, the power of the way of love, the power of the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. We must never, ever give up on any human being. We must have the power to forgive. We cannot remake what happened 400 years ago. But we're here today as one people, as one family, as one house, living in the American house. I got in trouble, what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. And I said to all of the young people here and to my colleagues in the Congress, it's time for us to get in trouble again. Good trouble, necessary trouble. My philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something. You cannot afford to be silent. During the 60s, I was arrested in jail 40 times. And since I've been in Congress, I've been arrested another 5 times. And I'm probably going to get arrested again for something. How can we be silent when our government, the federal government, is taking little children, little babies from their mothers and their fathers and put them in cages? We should say something. We should stand up and do something. So as we celebrate, as we commemorate, let's think, what are we doing? What are we saying? Now, my colleagues know that I'm not a lone talker, and I try to make it short. I try to speak through action. But I'm sick and tired, just sick and tired of what has happened on so many levels in our government. And I don't want to be political today, but I think it's time for us to get in the way, to get in trouble. If it means a sit in, just sit. If it means a sit down, sit down. Did all of you see when the Democratic members 2 years ago occupied the floor of the House of Representatives for the first time in history for more than 26 hours, trying to do something about gun violence? We got to stop it, the madness. We should have the right to be safe at school, to be safe in church, be safe at a party, a club. We must have that right. We all are human. We must be protected by our government. We don't need all of these guns. We don't. We don't need all of these guns. We must stop the killing and put an end to the violence. We can do it, and we must do it. I go back to another point I tried to make earlier. So many of our brothers and sisters, so many of our mothers and fathers never had an opportunity to register to vote, to cast a vote. So when President Barack Obama was elected, he was declared the winner, I jumped so high. I was at Dr. King Old Church in Atlanta speaking. I didn't think my feet were going to touch the ground. And I started crying, and members of the press asked me, why are you crying so much, John Lewis? So I'm crying for those who never had an opportunity. Never, ever had an opportunity to register to vote. Didn't live to see a man of color elected president of the United States of America. I'm crying for my mother, my father, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents. Crying for the 4 little girls that were murdered in Birmingham in a church. Crying for Dr. King and many others, Emmett Till and many others, Rosa Parks, for President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, 2 young men that I got to know very well. And sometimes we have to cry. There's not anything wrong with crying, but sometimes we just wrap away, just move the tears, and get up again and again and again and keep coming. And I said to each and every one of you, especially young people here, Never, ever give up. Never, ever get lost in the sea of despair. Keep the faith. Keep your eyes on the prize. Get in the way. Get in trouble. And so we're going to change things for the better. We can do it. And get a good and great education, young people. Stay in school. And be prepared to fight the good fight. Because in the final analysis, we are one people, we are one family, we all live in the same house. Not just the American house, but the world house. And it doesn't matter whether we are black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. We are one people. And we must believe in the way of peace, in the way of love, in the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. Hadn't been for the teaching of Dr. King and Gandhi, and our mothers and our fathers, many of us wouldn't be standing here today. So again, I am very, very hopeful, very optimistic about the future. Their forces want to take us back, but we're not going back. We've come too far, and we're not going back. We're going forward. We're going to create one America. We're one people. We're one family. We all live in the same house, the American house, the world house, and never, ever give up. Keep the faith. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm glad to know that members of the Arthur Ashe family are here. Arthur Ashe, glad to change the name of the boulevard of the street to Arthur Ashe. Was a good friend. In my home in Atlanta, there's a picture with Arthur Ashe, Julian Bond, and my wife when he came to visit us many years ago. So think about what Arthur Ashe did and the contribution he made. Came out of this state, out of this city. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Elegba Folklore Society.
Determined. The concept of the drum evolved, Congressman Lewis, into the drum major, where, like our namesake Elegba, he or she opens the roads, opens the boulevard, so that the people can come through. To bring forward the drum so that
Ladies and gentlemen, the Mayor of the City of Richmond, Levar Stoney.
Let's give another big round of applause to the Elegba Folklore Society. Yeah. Look at that town we got in the city of Richmond, right? All right, I want to end by extending a special thanks to Jamie Bosket with the entire staff at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, which put on this fabulous event. Let's give them a round of applause. VHMC is boldly leading the way in advancing our understanding of our Commonwealth's past with a view towards its future, as evidenced by the exhibit that just opened. If you have not gone, I ask that you go today. Determined is an appropriate way to describe not only its current exhibit, but also the mission of VHMC. And again, I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of David Harris as well, the nephew of Arthur Ashe. Who, along with Dontrese Brown from Randolph-Macon College, helped bring in key sponsors like Dominion Energy and spearheaded the outreach behind the Arthur Ashe Initiative. They helped turn the street renaming into the national weekend celebration of our city and of an American hero that was long overdue. Thanks are also due to our regional and state government partners in the Richmond Metropolitan Transportation Authority and the Virginia Department of Transportation. Their support for the change and the new signage that you will see on the highways and parkways that greet visitors and workers to our city every day will make the right first impression on the city of Richmond. And finally, I'd like to thank our very own City of Richmond employees. Uh-oh. A little windy up here. Led by our Chief Administrative Officer, Selena Cuffey-Glenn. I also want to thank our Parks and Recreation Director, Chris Frelke. I also want to thank the men and women of the Department of Public Works, led by Bobby Vincent. In just a moment, they will begin the process of replacing every sign that says Boulevard in our city with a sign that reads Arthur Ashe Boulevard, all by the end of the weekend. So I have one question left. Are you excited? Are you ready for the unveiling? If I could ask our choir to move into position now for the big moment. I also would like to invite Councilwoman Kim Gray. If y'all can clear a path right down the middle, please, for Councilwoman Gray. And also, I'd like to invite David Harris to join me for the unveiling. To represent the great cooperation between the city, RMTA, and VDOT, one sign has been provided from each. The work in the city will begin immediately after the ceremony, and highway and express signs will follow shortly in the weeks ahead. Once we are in position, I will invite you all to join me in the countdown. Are you ready? Are you ready? All right. Guess we'll join over here. I will do with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today for this important moment of remembrance, reflection, and celebration. Let us not forget the anniversary we mark today, nor the remarkable people who forged our path. As our platform party departs, I would ask that you please stay seated for just a few more moments, but I do hope that you'll enjoy the rest of your day on Arthur Ashe Boulevard. Determined is now officially open, and the Virginia Museum of History and Culture is free all day. Please enjoy. I'd also like to recognize our wonderful neighbors and collaborators, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. They invite you to visit their 2019 commemoration exhibit, Cosmologies from the Tree of Life, Art from the African American South, which features 34 extraordinary works of art acquired by the VMFA. The museum is also free, and they have refreshments as well. At 2 p.m., Congressman Don McEachin will host his colleagues of the United States Congressional Black Caucus for a town hall session on the state of Black America here at the museum and the Robbins Family Forum. Also today, I hope you'll join us at Arthur Ashe Athletic Center for a community gathering of games, food, and fun. This has been a remarkable day for Richmond, for the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, and for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day.